What's going on, guys? So we are out here at Bishop RV Center in Corpus Christi, Texas again, and we're going to talk about a topic that is often asked about on my channel, and that is what are the differences from a construction perspective between an entry or a entry mid-level fifth wheel and a very high-end fifth wheel. So we're going to go over some of them in detail. I think you're going to enjoy this video. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Now, something to keep in mind before we get started is there are all sorts of different things that differentiate different brands of fifth wheels. So one brand may do something that's in the same price range as another brand because they want to have an advantage over that other brand, whereas that other brand may do something else to try to counter it. Let me give you an example. If you look at a Coachman Chaparral, which is kind of a mid-entry level brand, and you look at the Astoria, which again is kind of a mid-entry level brand, you're going to see different characteristics that they both are going to have that the other one won't have, simply because they want to have an advantage in one area, or it's simply because how that specific brand builds their units. Let me give you an example. Okay, let's kick this off by looking at this Astoria. So this Dutchman Astoria is going to have some nice features. It's going to be at the entry-level price range, but it's going to have some things that are still going to make it stand out. And let's show you what they do at this entry-level range. And this is going to be the sub $40,000 price range. So when you look at this, the first thing that's going to stand out is the fact that it has the ground control auto leveling system. A really nice feature for a trailer in this price range. Some of them won't have it. This one does have it. When you look at what it's missing, it doesn't have a suspension equalizer. So that is something that is pretty common on the entry mid-level range versus the entry-level range. Also, you're going to see that this rides on a lighter duty axle. How do you know that? Because it's a 6-lug axle. So on a heavier duty axle, you're going to have an 8-lug. This right here is probably a 5,200 pound rated axle versus one that might be slightly heavier or one with a slightly higher rated axle, and it's usually going to start at about 6,000 or 7,000 pounds in terms of axle weight rating. So what's good about this unit from a construction perspective is that it has an auto leveling system. It has a pretty nice frame. It's a 10-inch I-beam frame. What it lacks is a equalizer suspension. That's something you could easily add to a trailer like this. It doesn't have any type of wet bolt or serviceable bolts in there. So anytime you need to service them, you're essentially going to have to take them out or simply replace them. And it rides on lighter duty axles, 6-lug axles. So these are probably 5,200 pound rated axles. Now, looking at this Chaparral Light, which is in roughly the same price range as that Astoria, different manufacturer completely. So the other one's a Dutchman product, this is a Coachman product, and they're actually owned by two different parent companies as well. When you look at this one, you're going to see some things that it doesn't have that the one next to it does have, even though they're pretty much the same price range. One thing that's noticeable in terms of the slide out is the Dutchman Astoria is going to have all cable driven slides, whereas the Coachman uses a rack and pinion slide system. Now, for smaller slides, not that big of a deal. On these larger slides, I prefer the rack and pinion system. But where the advantage goes to the Dutchman is the fact that it uses auto leveling, and this one does not have auto leveling. This one also has a 6-lug wheel on it, mainly because you don't necessarily need the heavier duty wheel. But one thing that's interesting is you can see how it's mounted to a boxed section beneath the frame. This one also rides on a slightly thinner frame. So this is an 8-inch I-beam, whereas the one next to us was a 10-inch I-beam. And part of the reason why they have that box section there is to lift it up slightly, so it's easier to hitch to more modern day pickup trucks that have taller beds. As you can see, this one also doesn't have an upgraded equalizer. Very similar overall in terms of construction. Okay, so when you're looking at the Coachman Chaparral Light and the Astoria, which are all in that mid $30,000 price range, and then you bump up to the Chaparral, which is in the $40,000 price range, let's look at some of the differences that you're going to see here. First of all, one of the differences, you're generally going to see more of the units spec'd out with an auto leveling system. And that usually means that it's just going to be equipped with it at the dealership. In many cases, it's optional, and it's still optional on some of these, but at this price point, it starts to become more of a standard feature that they spec into it. Also, you're going to start to see larger basement areas. So the basement area in this specific one is much larger than any of those entry-level ones, primarily because it's a taller unit and they have more space between the frame and the underhang for it. Now, this is not a drop frame, and that's something that you're going to see when we step up to the next unit and we show you what you get for a little bit more. But you're going to see larger, thicker baggage doors on some of them. Again, different brands are going to do different things to kind of make their unit stand out. Coachman with the Chaparral line likes to put these real thick baggage doors on, but in many of them, when you look at this door, see how thin that is? That's generally what a lot of the baggage doors are going to be on your lower cost units. Now, when it comes to the frame technology, on the longer units in this mid-price range, you're going to see 12-inch I-beams. So this is equipped with a 12-inch I-beam. It's a continuous I-beam that runs all the way from the front all the way to the back. And the reason why it's done this way are a couple things. First of all, it's kind of a cheaper way to build it. It's not necessarily cheap technology. You're going to see this on a lot of toy haulers as well, but it is definitely a more common technology on your mid to lower price units. When you step up to a slightly higher end unit, you're generally going to start seeing your drop frame technology, and that's where your main beam here transitions to another beam below it, so you have a much larger storage area. Can you imagine how much larger this would be if this right here was completely flat? And that's essentially what a drop frame gives you, and that's really the only benefit of a drop frame. From a suspension perspective, you're also going to start seeing better suspension. So in this specific case, you have the Dexter Easy Flex. Now, there are all sorts of different competing suspension types. You have suspensions from Moride, you have LCI suspensions, you have Dexter suspensions. They all kind of have their own bragging rights to them, but most of them are pretty effective in terms of stopping some of that vibration and harshness from traveling up to the actual chassis of the RV. So in the case of this specific system, it's actually a very common system on Chaparrals, but it also is pretty common on higher end units as well. Even some Riverstones use it, even some Redwoods use it. It's not a bad system, and it's definitely one that is better than not having any type of suspension equalizer at all. You'll also see that all your main slides are rack and pinion slides. Now, you will see cable-driven slides, you'll see Schwintek slides, you'll see different slide technologies on different models, right? So the key here is understanding which one is best for a specific application. For larger, heavier slides, I still always recommend the good old rack and pinion slide system. Next behind that would be like a Schwintek slide system that has the track right here, and then behind that would be the cable-driven slide system, or the new LCI system that uses also a track, but it's kind of elevated off of the sidewall. Now, as we move up slightly in price point, again, we're looking at the mid $30,000 price range, mid $40,000 price range, mid $50,000 price range, mid $50,000 to actually mid $60,000 price range for something like this. Let's take a look at some of the differences you're going to see in terms of upgrades over something in the mid $40,000 price. So with this, you're going to notice that there's frameless windows on the outside. You're also going to notice that it has a full profile front nose to it, which means it's much taller in the front living room area. Beyond that, it'll generally have a front painted cap, so the cap is going to hold up a lot better to the elements in the sun versus the gel coat caps that you're going to see on these units right here. Auto leveling pretty much is going to be completely standard. You'll not really be able to spec out a system without it in a price point approaching the mid 50s to mid 60s. Also, you're going to see drop frame technology. Again, drop frame technology just gives you more storage space. When you look at the front of this one, you can see how the floor goes all the way flat versus having a step up to where the frame would be running continuously here. You still get these real thick baggage doors. And one really nice standout feature about this specific coach in this price range is you're generally going to start getting wide body designed fifth wheels. So it gives you approximately 6 to 8 more inches of space inside, which actually accounts for quite a bit of extra space when you put it to practical use. You can start doing a lot more with the interior floor plan when you have that extra space. And when you compare the overall width, 101 inches wide on the outside to 96 inches wide, and the difference is doubled whenever you put your slides out if you have opposing slides. So you get a lot of room. Schwintek slides on the front, rack and pinion slides on the back. And at this price point, you'll generally start to see where the suspension changes as well, and you get a higher end suspension. What I like about the Brookstone though is the Brookstone has that Easy Flex suspension, which is the same suspension that they put on their midline Chaparral, and that's more of a benefit to the Chaparral as opposed to something taking away from the Brookstone. So they share a lot of the same suspension techniques when you get the mid-priced Chaparral. When you go to the lighter versions of the Chaparral, like the Chaparral Light or the X-Lite, it's going to have probably no suspension upgrade, and it will just have a standard steel equalizer. Something else that you should notice as well is that even though most all of these are equipped with 2 air conditioning units, that's how they spec them out here at Bishop. Some RV dealerships will only equip these with 1 AC unit. On your higher end units, you're generally going to see 2 air conditioning units come standard, and you're not going to have to worry about needing to upgrade to a second AC unit. So that's something that's also really nice when you move up to that $55,000, $65,000, $70,000 price range. Now the sidewall technology on the Brookstone is going to be exactly the same as the Chaparral. They both use Asdel. They both are about 1.25 inches thick, and they have foam insulation. So there's not a lot of difference there, and that's going to be pretty much the same in that price range when it comes to any type of fifth wheel. So whether or not you're looking at a Columbus or even at a Montana, they're generally going to have very similar sidewall technology in terms of how they're insulated and what they're insulated with. Some brands, even in that same price range, will use a different insulation technique. They'll actually use a hung insulation. It's a batted insulation, very similar to a home, and there's, you know, controversy on whether one is better than another. I personally think that they both work about the same in terms of really blocking exterior temperature from getting inside or leaking temperature from the inside out. Okay guys, so that'll wrap it up for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we show you the differences between a midline fifth wheel and a premium fifth wheel in terms of construction, some of the things that they do different to justify the significantly higher price. So if you haven't had a chance, now is a great time. Please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll come back to you again really soon.